If you're composing for someone else's project, which you may well be, you're going to need to consider the needs and the wishes of the filmmaker. After all, there's not much point in coming up with a great soundtrack that the person rejects because it wasn't what they wanted. So you will need to do a lot of consultation before you start, and a lot of maybe generating initial ideas and themes to see the various different directions in which you could take a project. There's no point in writing a load of heavy drum music and then finding out that actually what they wanted was something completely different. Quite apart from the artistic side of it, you're going to need to deal with some technical issues as well around the way the files are sent and received. So you have to think about what kind of files the filmmaker is going to give you and what they're going to need to get back from you. Now these days, you'll almost certainly get a digital file, probably a big movie file. It could be a final edit, a nearly final edit, or it could be a rough edit. It doesn't have to be finished necessarily. It certainly doesn't have to be graded. It doesn't have to be super HD for you to compose to it. You just need essentially scenes of the correct length to work with. It's a good idea, as we looked at in the introductory course, to try and match up frame rates, markers, and so on. We'll look at that in some more detail later. In terms of the kind of sound you're given by the filmmaker, you're likely to get separate audio files. So you might get things like location sound, voiceover, Foley, ADR, and other kinds of sounds which will later be mixed in post to create the finished movie soundtrack, by which I mean all the sound within the project, not just the music. These may come to you in the form of an OMF file, and it was developed to enable filmmakers and musicians to move projects between different DAWs without losing all the audio file placements. So essentially it's about source media and positions within a project. It doesn't transfer most of the specialized settings like MIDI plugins, audio plugins, things like that. It's really just like a basic template. So you may get sent an OMF. Cubase is able to open those. And hopefully you should be able to just import everything into Cubase and it should be lined up, or it should be fairly obvious how it needs to be lined up. In terms of what you export at the end, your filmmaker might want an OMF file sending to them. Again, Cubase can do this. They'll probably want a stereo mixdown of the music, but they'll almost certainly also want individual stems, or group stems at least, so that they can remix the music afterwards. Now, by remix, I don't mean like a dance remix. I mean literally changing the mix. This is important because some filmmakers like to change the mix of music tracks in post-production because they make changes to the film after you've composed the music, or because they have very specific requirements. What you're working on might not be the finished product. So for example, if they have all the drums as a group of stems, they have all the strings as a group of stems, all the pianos, all the choirs separately, they can essentially submix the project themselves afterwards. In terms of exporting stuff, you're also going to want to export in standard video compatible audio formats, which usually means 24-bit 48 kilohertz WAVs, and of course naming and organizing your files is also very important, as we'll see. So let's dive in next and look at the first of our advanced tools, the tempo and transpose tracks.